All right. We're probably going to go ahead and get started. Take it away, Seth.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'll pull the slides down so you can see us. There we go. Welcome to our Vaisala Xweather developer Q&A. This is our fourth in the series. Number 4.
So many.
We did the data API, our raster maps, and maps GL. And this is our fourth in webhooks and push data. So we're getting into some more advanced use cases, but it's actually some really cool capabilities that we're excited about. We're caffeinated. We've had lots of coffee. We're ready to go. So thanks for joining us. I am Seth Miller. I head up the data DAS core team here. So we get to play with a lot of the backend infrastructure. We get to pull in all the data, process it, APIs, maps, all the fun stuff. And sitting next to me all the way from Arizona, currently here, which is great.
It's great. It's great to be here.
Brandon.
Thanks for having me.
Is he here? Are we sure?
Yeah.
I'm not sure at this point. But yeah, thanks, Seth. Brandon Clark here. Happy to be back. I did the raster maps with Seth last time. And today we're going to talk about webhooks. I work on the data API and the webhooks. So this is right up my alley. And strap yourselves in. It's going to be fun. Next to me is Holly.
Hi, guys. I'm Holly. I am the marketing manager for our weather and environmental data segment here at Xweather. As a reminder, before we get started here, as you kind of have questions throughout the session, feel free to drop them into the chat so that we can answer them when we get to the live question section.
All right. So our agenda, like we've done the other sessions, we're just going to go through some kind of product updates that we have. Then we'll go over webhooks as an overview. A lot of the questions we got were just like, well, what are webhooks? Kind of what are some scenarios you'd use them in? So we'll start with that just to kind of get that all set. And then, of course, additional questions that we have, we can cover then. So the updates section, Maps.gl is undergoing a ton of development. The JS SDK has additional road weather regions for Australia and New Zealand are available. And then animating raster data sets as well. Like the satellite layer, so those will match up as you animate with like radar or whatever else you can think of there. And then ongoing fixes and improvements as well. That full change log is available on GitHub. And then the Apple SDKs as well, going through lots of development, added air quality and marine constants to better interact with that data, and then transparency support for color ramps as you get more creative and want more complex ramps there. That's into V1 and has been released. I think it's V3 something now. I don't know. Lots of development going on there, but that changelog, of course, is available. And then the Android SDK is in beta 2, so that one's not yet released. Looking for feedback on that. So any Android, any Android devs out there, start playing with it. Let us know of any feedback. We make these tools for you guys, so to better implement data sets and create cool experiences for users. So that improved download and caching, improved performance, of course, but then some new features. The particle layers are working now too, which is always the exciting thing and kind of a fun interactive differentiating element there. Upcoming releases, the data API, expanding support for the billing multipliers. That's been something that we've been excited about. And as we continue to push into using those multipliers, we're able to decouple functionality of the API with some of the billing. So that means we can make the API work in more intuitive ways while keeping the billing more consistent and transparent for you. So Brandon's been working on that a bunch.
Yeah, one of the biggest requests we get is how can I get data beyond a day without making multiple queries? And previously and currently today, we've only been able to allow up to 1 day, because if I allow everybody everything, then we can't keep track of how much people are using. So with this update that should be coming in the next week or two, we're going to give you up to a month for endpoints like conditions. So then people don't have to worry about paginating if their queries are going to be less than a month's worth of data. So we're excited to get that out there. It's something that people have asked about a lot, and it makes your queries easier. And then you can just take a bunch of that data and do whatever you need to do with it. Beyond that, one of the other things we're adding is to the Lightning Analytics endpoint. Currently, the default behavior will return an error ellipse with a 50% confidence ellipse, basically telling you how confident we are that the lightning strike took place in that area. Now, the enhancement allows users to pass an 80, 90, and 99% confidence. So depending on your use case, you may be looking for varying degrees of confidence. On that note, updates aside, let's get to the fun stuff. I've got a question for you, Seth.
You do?
I do. It's an important one.
Okay.
What's a webhook?
Oh my goodness, Brandon, what a good first question. Webhooks, yeah. So webhooks are I guess, a means to push data. And it's really for that timely data solution. So as you're looking for data as quick as possible into your application or getting all the way out to your users, that's where webhooks and push data come in. So it's where Xweather, our servers, push data to you. And typically that looks like you decide on what data set or data sets you want pushed to your servers. We choose a region that can be globally, or it can be constrained to like the continental US or a given state or area that you're concerned about where you have assets or users. And this comes in the form of an HTTP post to like an API. So that data of that data set is actually contained in that post body and sent to your servers. So that supports basic auth, or like in the query string or whatever, we can configure URLs to send to your system. Goes over HTTPS. You can make sure that that data is sent by us. But this data is micro batched, we call it. So it's sent in small chunks. So then it can be sent to a distributed group of servers. It's very cloud native and serverless friendly. We'll actually split those payloads into smaller pieces to get into like Lambda for serverless architecture, that type of thing, which we've gotten great feedback on from users that say like, okay, great, we could just grab this and dump it in a database, and then they can push events throughout there, which has been awesome. So the payloads use actually the same data format as the Xweather data API. So there's not really that big of a change. It's just instead of having your application pull from our server, we'll just send that to you, and that's in that same format. It's all documented on our website. But it's that same format that you've been used to if you've been using the data sets on our API. So speaking of data sets.
So many data sets. And like Seth said, whether we push it to you or you pull it, the format's the same, the structure's the same. So if you're already used to using it, it's pretty easy to turn around and consume it in a push format. And with that, not all data sets are treated the same. And what I mean by that is we have a data set like conditions or air quality or maritime data where it's constantly changing. You query any point in the world, and we're going to give you a suite of data points related to that endpoint. That doesn't really make a ton of sense to push to you because it's constantly changing, and you can query anytime, anywhere, and get an answer back. Now, where it does make sense to get webhooks data is stuff like stuff like alerts, lightning, and tropical cyclones, where generally those things aren't happening, but it's important to be aware of when they do happen or could potentially occur. So the most common use cases or common endpoints we're seeing is with alerts, lightning, tropical cyclones, fires, and storm cells. And again, these are for use cases where generally these things aren't happening most of the time, 90, 95, 99% of the time. But when they are happening, you need to be aware of it, and you don't want to constantly be questioning, querying us. Is this happening? Is this happening? Is this happening? We're just going to tell you when it's happening. On the flip side, some of the less common use cases, but still very valuable, depending on what you need, is lightning or endpoints like lightning summary, lightning threats, and storm reports. Now, some of these data sets, they behave a little bit differently. For example, with threats, we take several different data sets and combine them into one to inform you about various threats that might be happening. It's aptly named, if you will. So it could be thunderstorms, it could be lightning, it could be tornado warnings. We'll include that in the data set that's returned. Other use cases could include storm reports. For example, there's boots on the ground. It's usually how this storm or this data set works, where they're going out and they're finding snow, they're finding lightning, wind, rain, hail events. They report that to the National Weather Service. They QC it, and then they store it and send it out. We can send that to you. Now, granted, that particular data set isn't necessarily on the fly because of all those steps that take place with QC, but it is important in case you need to build up a use case for that, for whatever that might be.
Yeah, we can take any of our really event-based data sets, like Brandon was saying, and push those to you kind of wherever it makes sense, which is great. So yeah, a bunch of our endpoints, what do we say? And there's like 49 data endpoints we have.
A lot of endpoints.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Yeah, but all of those event-based ones, we can certainly send you and are available in webhooks. And some of them, like Brandon said, make more sense than others. So other push methods that we have, so talking webhooks, that's the kind of HTTP version. We have other push methods that are from our Lightning network. So Vaisala has operated the best global Lightning network in the world. And we push this data out to a variety of clients, and it's operated for many, many years. This data is pushed out via like a TCP feed. So I think some of the data is binary, like a gRPC sort of protobuf format. Otherwise, it'll be a ASCII format that's actually just consumed as a stream. So that's where a server will actually connect to one of our data servers. So that could be an SSH tunnel or actual like VPN into the network, and then you make a data feed connection. Other times we'll actually do a satellite feed in very specific instances. Of course, that's a pretty niche, cool solution if that's something you need, if you can't rely on the wide area network per se. Otherwise, there's LDM as well. That's probably familiar to the meteorologists out there. That's a data feed system that's been in the meteorological community. It's a pub sub solution that we've had for a long time in the Met space. So those are kind of, I guess, some older but tried and true ways to do that, currently powering our Lightning network. But if that's something where you're like, gosh, I really wish I could get this data that way, reach out and let us know. Otherwise, there's data drop off. That's sort of push, but it's a triggered solution, I guess. So as that data comes in, we'll batch that up and actually save it to other locations like AWS S3. And then from there, you can listen to S3 events like object create events and trigger SNS topics, or go into queues with SQS, that kind of thing. So we do have some customers using that with our Lightning network. Otherwise, SCP and SFTP will actually provide that kind of data on our server, and you can connect via one of those methods and just kind of pull that down. So yeah, there's a lot of methods out there. There's lots of different solutions for different use cases. But if one kind of piques your interest or you have an idea for something, yeah, reach out.
Seth, as it pertains to Lightning data and the various ways we can push it, it is shocking how we're able to do that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Push versus pull after everybody groans. Push versus pull. So yeah, push data, like we're talking about, that's the timeliness factor. So if things are really event-based or not a continuous thing, like, and timeliness is a factor if it's alerts, if it's lightning, if it's life critical sort of data that's coming through. That's where webhooks and pushing data really shines. It's simple to set up, right? We just configure to send to your server. You can consume it in those ways that we just listed, and then keep the data flowing throughout your system all the way to your end users. And it's that event-based architecture. So we like to use event-based architecture as early as we can in any of our data processing. So we turn that into pushing data throughout our system. And then this is the way where we can push that data to you. You push it through your system, push it to your users, push all the way through, which is great.
A lot of pushing.
Don't
forget pull day either.
Servers can skip sending empty requests, which is kind of cool. So as we're pushing data, if there's nothing happening, we're not sending that data to you. We can, but if there's nothing happening, it really cuts down on a lot of noise, I guess, and a lot of what would be like pull if you pulled on a timer. Just a lot of nothing coming back and just a lot of hits being used for no reason. But yeah, pulling data, that's a little better for like constantly changing data, like Brendan mentioned, for the interpolated data sets. That type of data that's just constantly going through its curve and cycles, it doesn't make a lot of sense to really push that to you since it is continuous. Otherwise, like certain things like changing locations, like if you just have a single use case where things are moving around, it might not make sense to push a huge region of data just for these one little points. Otherwise, user triggered updating as well. That was a good one Brandon thought of was, as you pull out a mobile app or your users pull out a mobile app, it doesn't make sense to always send you observation data and forecast data for that user. Like just pull it when they open their app and then they'll get the most up-to-date information. But cost as well, like, pulling, it's a little less efficient, but it can be cheaper in some scenarios. But a lot of scenarios at scale and at an enterprise grade level, push data is the solution that we recommend.
Sweet.
So how does somebody get going with a webhook?
That's a great question, Seth. So let's play out this hypothetical scenario where you've determined webhooks is going to work for you. You're probably in touch with your account rep, and they're going to give you a form that looks something like this. And I hope you got it up right now. Now, I've made this fictional company here. It's called Weather Never Sleeps. You can check it out, weatherneversleeps.com. For this company, we've determined that we want data from the Lightning endpoint. So as you can see, we filled that part of the form out. Now, as far as the coverage area is concerned, we could send you continental US, we can send you maybe a specific state, country, or you can even provide a bounding box or a polygon specific to the areas you're concerned about. And then the update interval, it doesn't always make sense to be the near time updating in kind of that micro batching fashion that Seth talked about. Maybe you only want updates every 5, 10, 30, 60 minutes. We can do that as well. So you let us know how frequently you want that data. The format options you have are going to be JSON or GeoJSON, depending on your use case, whether you want to do geospatial queries on the data we send you, or if you just want the JSON data itself. Next, in the URL portion, we want to know what endpoints you've set up that we're going to post the data to. And we can support multiple environments. So if you have a development environment, staging, and then obviously a production environment, you let us know which endpoints and how we're going to hit those, and those are where we'll send them. And then as far as authentication goes, we want to make sure that we're only sending you data and nobody else has access to this. So you're not getting, rogue data or something that you're not expecting. So we can, support API keys on our end so that we can communicate to each other and nobody else is. And as far as the comments go, in this fictional setup here, I only want cloud to ground strikes. So I'm not super worried about intra-cloud strikes. So when I see that, I'll go ahead and make sure our configuration is set up to do so. And then you're only getting those specific strikes. And of course, as things change and maybe your application changes or your use case changes, or you just decide I want more data or less data, you can let us know. And it's simple enough for me to go in and change your configuration.
Cool. All right. So to your questions, and again, as a reminder, pop your questions into the chat as they come up. But the first question that we received prior to, the actual session is, can you share a little bit more about webhooks, which we already did, but beyond what we did, how they work, what interfaces they're compatible with, what frequency they update or push at. Some of those details.
Yeah, so the HTTP API, again, that's the way we send data. Post, of course, makes the most sense because we include the actual data in the body there. We support those authentication methods that Brandon just described. But then also the frequency, I think, is probably the thing we haven't touched on. That depends on the data set. And a lot of this data is, event-based, so we can do near real time as quickly as we're getting the data streaming through our system. We'll micro batch that up and send it to you. But otherwise, we could do like more of a timer-based approach. If that's something that if you're looking for, things more on a consistent interval, or like Brandon mentioned and we were talking about before, if you need that empty data, you can kind of use that as a little bit of like a heartbeat, I guess, in that scenario. But yeah, if you're concerned or have questions about a specific data set, reach out to your account rep. We can, figure that out and get a solution in place.
And we mentioned earlier, the payloads are the same whether you're pulling or pushing. So if you see a data set in our docs and you say, well, I wonder if this works with webhooks, we can figure something out. You just forward it on to us and we'll go from there.
Cool. Thanks, guys. The second question is, could you share some sample applications of alerting users when a severe weather event happens, or just weather event in general?
Yeah, so one use case I can think of is this particular client, they work with high school football games. So, Friday night's high school football night, that's primarily when they're played, and they need to be aware of when lightning strikes are approaching them so they can take the necessary actions to clear the field, clear the event, and make sure everybody's safe. So basically, we are going to send them lightning data when it's encroaching on certain areas, and then we're sending them lightning data all the time. And then from there, they're able to compare our strikes with, the asset locations they have, the different stadiums that they're supporting. And then from there, they are able to basically notify event staff when X number of minutes is going to be lightning strikes within an area that's not okay for participating in those events.
Cool. Yeah. Lots of really critical events like that, or use cases, I should say. The third question, how can I send alerts to my users when receiving alerts via webhooks?
Yeah, so let's take a kind of a scenario where you have a number of assets, whether it be property or life safety considerations, and they're located at certain points. And maybe you have a high concern with privacy, and you don't want to share location data, which we're all about that privacy, and so if we don't need that location data specifically, but we can send you GeoJSON, whether it be points or polygons, for specific items such as lightning or alerts. And then from there, most modern databases, PostgreSQL and MongoDB, they support geospatial querying methods. So we can just send you the polygon. And then from there, you can go ahead and query your locations that are kept private to you, so we're not exposed to it. And then from there, trigger events based on protecting life and property.
Thank you, Brandon. We just got our first question in the chat. So
You can only ask questions that we can answer.
well, hopefully this one is answerable. So we're going to go ahead and take a break from the pre-questions and answer this one quick. Would it be possible to configure webhooks based on multiple ranges of lightning kilo amp intensities? For example, I'm only interested in lightning that's less than negative 30 kilo amps, and anything that are above 50. So negative 30 and positive 50 kilo amps.
I believe so, because
Yeah,
that would be something that we can do with the query functionality, and
Yeah.
we can actually query our database and make sure that we send you just those kind of more significant events. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Like, that's a cool use case.
Yeah, I'm just wrapping my head. If it's not something that I can do out of the box today, it's something that I can easily turn around and support. So yes, we can absolutely
Yeah, we
do
have that information, as you're probably familiar with, in our data API. So then we can filter those events and figure something out. Yeah, that's a great question. That's awesome.
1 for 1.
Yeah, got it. Nice.
Thanks, Siraj. And if you want to talk more in depth about that, feel free to reach out to us at you can reach out to customer success at xweather.com. Cool. Next question. How do webhooks perform under high data loads?
Yeah, events, in the weather industry are very streaky, I guess. You'll get days with, not a lot of storms or not a lot of severe weather going on. And then other times you'll get just a ton happening. We've built our systems to be, very redundant and durable in these situations. So from a webhook side, it's very resilient. But as we're sending data to you, that is something to consider. You're going to have to scale, kind of up and down as these things happen. So we're very serverless friendly, I guess. So we split those micro batches up into smaller pieces. So then when we hit your service, it can take that data and spread it across a bunch of different servers, just so you can scale up, scale down as needed. So that's what's really helpful about using those micro batches as opposed to just a stream of data. And it is something to consider. So whether your servers scale up and down, then you're of course going to need your database to scale up and down. Typically, it isn't a ton of like volume of data. It will be, the baseline will be low and then it will spike up, but it's typically not, that much compute. Even relatively small servers can handle this type of data. But it is something to be aware of. And yeah, we'll send messages. But then if you need to scale out or scaling takes a second, we do have retries built in as well. So if we can't hit your service or if it times out or something, we will retry a little bit later. Now we won't retry indefinitely, just because the event will be over. And if it's hours past,
You don't want to know about a tornado warning yesterday.
Yeah, you probably don't care about that anyway. But yeah, making sure that you can scale up and down as needed. Otherwise, if your baseline is, even moderately powered, you should be just fine.
Yeah, and kind of related on that note, resiliency, especially from your end, if your application is life safety dependent, definitely want to have some resiliency built in, because we're going to fire away at those URLs you sent us, the endpoints. And like I said, we're going to retry, but we're going to continue firing away. So always being prepared for worst case scenario, friend of mine once told me security is always too much till it's not enough. So being ready for that, and that applies to resiliency in this respect too.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question is, are there any rate limits? And if so, how can users manage them?
Good question. Yeah, the rate limits really only apply to our data API, and Webhooks is actually a really good solution to the rate limits. So instead of polling us at, a high frequency to get the information you want, and probably getting the same answer a lot, depending on what you're asking for, this allows us the opportunity to just send you the changes, just send you information when things change and when things matter. So yeah, rate limits here don't apply, not a concern.
Yeah, like Seth said, it's a good solution to avoid rate limiting because, maybe there's not a lot of lightning strikes going on right now, right? It's, pretty early in the day. There's probably not much going around, at least continental US. But as things ramp up, we get one of those severe days. You get a ton of lightning strikes coming through, and if you don't want to get rate limited for those kind of instances, so Webhooks is going to be the way to go because we're just going to keep firing away.
Awesome. The last question that we got prior to is, what retry mechanisms are available if a webhook fails to deliver the data? And I think you already kind of covered this.
Yeah, I did just touch on it a little bit, but yeah, we will retry multiple times in like a roll-off fashion, as is common. But we won't retry forever. So, I guess we would recommend, if you're trying to build up a data set, you can do a true up with a pull sort of method after the fact if you do have issues. But we will retry a number of times and try and spread that out to try and get you the data that you're looking for. But of course, we can't retry forever.
Cool. We can kind of hang out here just to see if any additional questions come in through the chat, but that is everything that we received prior to. So yeah,
we're doing good on time. Awesome.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and share the link to our webhooks documentation for y'all. If you're interested in checking that out.
Oh, we do have a question that just came in.
Excellent. Yes, from Senya. Okay. What does your pricing structure look like for the webhooks? And I can actually answer this one. So webhooks are a little challenging. We don't offer trials for it. And the pricing structure actually depends on how many locations you have, what specific endpoints you're trying to enable the webhook for. So as much as I know people kind of hate to hear this, it's one of those conversations that you're going to have with one of our technical experts or sales folks. But
yeah, there's just so many different use cases and different data sets and different regions. Like, it really depends.
Lots of different parameters to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, sorry.
No, you're good.
You mentioned we won't do, trials, and that's absolutely true. It's not a self-serve trial kind of thing. But if you're having those conversations with your account reps and you're serious about them, we'll absolutely set something up for you to start playing with.
Yes. Yeah. It's just not something that you can our API trial, our developer trial on the website does not include webhooks.
Yeah. It's not a self-serve. We have to go and actually turn it on and configure it with you and stuff. But, we're happy to help throughout development and those
Job
stages
security
as well.
For me.
Lots of manual configuration involved though. So just because of the amount of nuances that kind of go into setting that up, it is not self-service.
So as we wait for more questions, I'll fire our last slide here, Holly.
Cool. We actually have 2 more questions that just came in. Cool. So could you please discuss the authentication mechanism that will be used by webhooks? And that's also from Diraj.
Yeah. So in the simplest fashion, we will take whatever API key you give us, throw that in the header. And then as long as you're authorizing, posts with that header, then that's pretty straightforward. So then the auth is mostly set up on your side. We just need the key, and then we'll put that in the header.
Cool. And then from Ben, you said data /conditions. So the conditions endpoint, sorry, it took me a minute to parse that in my brain, is better pulled than pushed because it's constantly changing. If I have a use case where I want it pushed, would that even be possible? For example, if I wanted to alert a user that it started or stopped raining at a location, or is that just not supported right now?
That's a good question, Ben. And that's something that we've kind of dabbled in, I guess, in the past. So typically our webhooks, we're pushing data for a large area. So that would be, here's all of the alerts that are happening in this area, or here's this big area. We're pushing data to that area. So it's tougher to say, like, when is it going to start raining at this specific point? Typically, we haven't deployed webhooks to do something like that. Although that type of, engine, sort of decision engine type data is a really interesting use case for us. So yeah, let's talk about that, Ben. Let's let's jump in on something like that, because that is really cool and something that I think is valuable, and others have kind of similar scenarios. So yeah, let's figure out a way to power that, because I do think that's pretty neat. And right now, yeah, it would just be, sort of fetching a forecast or nowcast on an interval, and then alerting users based on that. But yeah, that is a neat use case, and giving people a push heads up, of course, is popular in weather apps and stuff. So yeah, very cool. Good question. But yeah, reach out to like your account rep, Ben, and let's talk about that. We can get on an engineering call and figure something like that out. That would be pretty neat.
Very cool. Yeah, well, we can continue kind of hanging out if there's any additional questions for a minute or so. But
what's
if
next,
not,
Holly?
Yeah. So keep your eyes on a follow-up. We'll send an email out with some resources for webhooks, link to start a trial if you want to play around with the API. Again, webhooks is not supported through the developer trial, but as Brandon mentioned, they can set something up for you to kind of play with if that's something that you decide that you're interested in. And then we'll also send out the link to this recording, and then, yeah, details on our next developer Q&A. So still yet to be determined. We've got a couple of ideas for that one. If there's anything specific that you want to know more about, feel free to pop it into the chat, and we will take it into consideration for future sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting your feedback with those developer Q&As is great, because we have ideas about what people want to hear about, but it doesn't always coincide with what people want to hear about. So hearing from you is best for us, because if you have the question, there's a good chance somebody else does.
Definitely. Cool. No more questions throughout that. So if you have questions that kind of pop up, email your account rep, or you can email customersuccess@xweather.com. I'll pop that into the chat. And yeah, we can wrap up.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Until the next one. Bye.